How'd you like to pay, cash or card? Cash is $5, card is $10. But the price up there says $5, you can't do that. Hey guys, Sebastian from AskSebby. Today we're going to look at a Wall Street Journal article about some businesses looking to charge you more if you're someone who wants to use a credit card. Pretty much everyone who watches this channel. Big favor is to give this a thumbs up to help with that algorithm, because there probably will be people who watch this video who don't like credit cards, helps with the ratio, and if you are someone new here and you want to get that cash back while you still can, then consider subscribing. If this does become a normal thing, then it does start a timer for when this whole game ends. Let's run through the key points of the article and then we'll look at the 5 core questions. More small businesses and even some larger ones are charging shoppers a fee to use cards or discounts if they choose to use debit, cash, or checks. The move is meant to pass on the fees from the businesses who are currently incurring it down to the consumers. We've seen credit card usage increase along with reward points and general credit card interest. Before you start canceling your cards, know that this is currently a relatively limited trend, but it is something that's growing. Less than 5% of small businesses that are accepting credit cards are charging surcharges. Put another way, that's about 1 in every 20 stores. 5 years ago, it was only 2% instead of 5%. In the case that it does continue as a trend, I'll cover some ways to get around this towards the end of the video. So key question number 1 is, would you stop shopping somewhere if they charged you extra to use a card or if they only took cash? Wendy Timmer, who runs an outdoor power equipment company, says that her customers don't really mind and that they even run home to get their checkbooks. In her case, she's saving tens of thousands of dollars every year, so that's a pretty big win. On the flip side of this though, you have people like Bob from Alabama who loves his USAA cashback card. The 70-year-old often won't shop in places that penalize credit card usage. I realize that this audience is going to be a bit biased and isn't representative, but I think it's still interesting to hear what your thoughts are. For me, I think a lot of it depends on the value that I'm getting and how replaceable that service or that restaurant is. If the gas station that I'm going to is 20% cheaper than everywhere else, then I'll happily pay 5% more because that still mathematically makes sense. Or if anything, I'll just use cash. For me, this isn't that different from looking at Best Buy, B&H, Amazon, or anywhere else before making a purchase. My haircut, for example, is only $10 and it's cash only. And technically it was even a bit cheaper when I started there. It started at $5, went up to $6, and then with inflation and everything else is now at $10. I'll happily walk over to Chinatown and pay cash because it's really good value. And yes, there are other places that might give me a better haircut, but they often cost $30 and it's just not really worth it to me. Whether it's food or a service, there's probably a place that's a go-to for you that you really like. So for me, I have a go-to dim sum place, I have a few ramen places that I really like, and now I kind of have a good all-you-can-eat place. Another example would be institutions that are super well known. They can pretty much do whatever they want, but they have so much reputation that people are still going to go there. On the flip side though, if you're just an average pizza shop or Chinese takeout place, then people are probably not going to care. You're going to piss off people that are just going to give up on you and never come back. For USAA Bob, he would happily drive to the next gas station. Number 2, is it worth it for the business? I think a lot of people and businesses discount the value of taking cards. Credit cards eliminate substantial costs of counting, storing, safeguarding, and transporting cash. Where you live probably also plays a pretty big role. So for example, I went to Safeway today and they have armed guards with bulletproof vests. Karen's Dairy Groove, an ice cream shop outside of Cleveland, Ohio, charges an extra quarter when customers use credit cards for purchases of less than $5. Maybe I'm crazy, but I think minimums are fine, so if you are below a certain amount charging a bit extra, that seems pretty reasonable, but I feel like if you're doing a charge across all orders, even if it's above $5, even if it's above $10, feels a bit unreasonable. My business is made on pennies. I do everything right and I have a small margin. On a $5 ice cream, 25 cents is a big chunk of the margin. I got super curious because that always happens. The margin for ice cream shops is about 40%. So for that $5 in ice cream, she's making about $2 in profit. 25 cents divided by $2 is about 12.5% of the margin. 12% isn't that small, but I think it's the cost of doing business, and in a lot of cases, it's kind of like insurance for the company. The area that the ice cream shop is located in is super safe, but even then, there's still an armed robber who was going through Hotel 6s and gas stations robbing people. I'm a pretty big fan of artisanal ice cream and also coffee, but I'm not a fan of the markups. On the note of artisanal coffee though, I want to thank Cometeer for partnering with me for today's video. Cometeer isn't like any other coffee. They offer delicious pour-over coffee that's incredibly convenient, brewed 10 times stronger, and delivered in frozen recyclable aluminum capsules. I love that they source their coffee from some of the best specialty coffee roasters, which is then ground and brewed to perfection. The trick is that they flash freeze it down to -321 Fahrenheit in order to lock in the flavor and freshness. All you need to do is add 6 to 8 ounces of water, and you have artisanal, barista grade quality in less than 2 minutes. I generally like to have my coffee black and typically medium or dark roast, that full body experience. If you're someone who likes it with milk, then that obviously works as well. And one cool thing is that this is one of the few coffees that Mandy can actually have black. She typically likes milk and sugar. My favorite specialty roaster is Counterculture, which is from Durham, North Carolina. As someone who loves black coffee, I like that it's not burnt, it doesn't have that bitterness to it. It actually tastes like high quality coffee. It's awesome that each order comes with 4 different roasts from cafes that I've always wanted to try. Currently, Cometeer isn't fully open to the public, but if you use the link down below, you can skip the line and get 50% off your first order. That's only $1 per cup of coffee, and I definitely think it's worth a try. Again, link down below, and thank you Cometeer for supporting my coffee habit and also supporting the channel.
Number 3, should you even swipe your card? I think it comes down to a math equation. So how much value are you getting and how much would you otherwise get with either cash or something else? So for example, let's say the item is $10 and if you use credit card, they charge you 3% more. So if you have a card that earns at least 3%, then it's pretty much a wash. You don't really mind this. If it's something like 3x back though, you could argue that maybe this does make a lot of sense because even though you're paying 3%, 3x for you is worth more than 3% because you're looking to transfer it out to partners. I feel like in most cases, it's pretty easy to run the value prop and the cost of this. Oftentimes, it'll either be something pretty reasonable or it'll be something pretty crazy. If you're someone doing non-food items, then there's also other benefits to this because you get a lot of protections with your credit card. If you order something online and it doesn't show up, or if the package goes missing, yes, you can kind of contest this and they can go through that whole process, but they'll tell you to wait maybe 4 to 6 weeks and they'll investigate it to see what happens. But with a credit card, you can just contest that fee and they're going to immediately back you. This also works long term. Purchase protection and extended warranty can be some of the most useful benefits, especially if you're someone who either is clumsy or you get very unlucky. I'm pretty good about my headphones, but some of you have lost one of the 2 headphones and then have had the credit card company reimburse you within that initial period. Another example that is pretty relevant is extended warranty. So if you're someone who had a Nintendo Switch and you were dealing with the Joy-Con drift, then you could have claimed it with some issuers and they would have actually covered the whole thing. This was before people realized it was the controller that needed to be replaced and fixed rather than the whole system. Your mileage may vary here, but just some food for thought. Number 4, is Dave Ramsey right? One of the points that really confused me with the whole argument about charging more for credit cards is that people traditionally have believed that people who use credit cards are spending more frivolously and spending more on their purchase. So for example, if I would have only ordered an ice cream before, now I'm ordering 2 or maybe adding sprinkles to the one that I'm getting because I'm using a credit card. Assuming this is true and the average person spends more money because of a credit card, then why would you want to add more friction? You'd make it easier for them, and if anything, you'd want to waive the fee because you want them to spend more money. That matters more in the long term. I care more about getting the whole transaction rather than losing out on that 3%. If we put this another way, you don't really see casinos charging extra money every time you play because they're like, hey, it's a tax on your game. I would argue that's also why companies like Affirm exist, because it makes it easier for people to buy the item, meaning that businesses are having more sales. Credit card usage decreased in 2020 because people were afraid of accruing debt, which tells me that people are generally responsible. So is Dave Ramsey actually correct, and the businesses doing this are actually being very stupid? I feel like it should technically be one or the other. Number 5, are we moving into a cashless society? I feel like Gen Z and also Gen Alpha are going to drive a lot of the future trends, so it depends on what they think. If you look into their preferred payment method, it still leans towards credit card and debit card. Maybe we eventually move away from physical cards and into purely Apple Pay and also Android Pay, kind of similar to how in China, they pretty much only use WeChat and Alipay. Whether it's debit, credit, or even crypto, I think we are going to move away from physical cash for a lot of transactions. Factor in that for the businesses that actually want to grow, they would probably want to leverage tech, and a lot of this is going to depend on the data that you have. So for example, Square does a pretty good job at underwriting loans because they have so much information on your sales and they can reasonably predict what it's going to look like in a few months. They're comfortable lending you money because they have a book of all your transactions. Hypothetically, let's say 25 to 50% of businesses do a surcharge for credit cards. What do you do then? How do you think about this? I think number one, it goes back to the does it make sense to swipe your card math? And I think it still will in a lot of cases. It just depends on what you're looking to do. If you're after cash back, then you're probably not in that great of a spot. Something like 4% back probably drops down to 1% or maybe even a bit lower. It'll probably look a lot more like Europe, and there still is some value, but it's not as great for cashback people. If anything, it's going to be more about travel benefits, so lounge access, and then also redeeming those points for aspirational stays like hotels and airline stuff, so first and business class. So 4% cashback minus the 3% in fees, that's 1% cashback. In the case that you're getting 4x on points, if you value the points at 2 cents per point or 3 cents per point, that 4x back is really something like 8 or 12%. Number two, we'll probably start to see the rise of debit cards. There's actually a few startups doing this, and I'll probably cover them in the future weeks, but it's pretty interesting because there is a little loophole. The Durbin Amendment for Dodd-Frank caps interchange fees for big banks pretty low. Banks of over 10 billion in assets can only charge 21 cents along with 0.05%. They can also charge an additional penny for fraud-related purposes. Smaller banks with less than $10 billion, though, can charge 1.6%. That's why we see a lot of these smaller banks pretty much lending their charter out to startups in order to make the money because they're not really good at marketing, but startups are, and startups can make that interchange fee. If this does end up happening, then I wouldn't be surprised if each regional bank or each credit union ends up either partnering with a startup or even forming their own company. Port Bank is owned by MetaBank, and it's pretty much their startup. I would say that there's actually a lot of meta right now for startup debit cards, and I'm not sure if I should talk about this, but we're towards the end of the video, so if you're someone sticking around, if you're watching this, then I think you deserve to hear this. So technically, for something like the Yada debit card, you can pay your friends via Venmo, via Cash App, via all these other things for free because they don't charge you a fee for debit cards. Let's say I use something like Melio where I can do these debit card transactions and there's also no fee. Melio referral link if you want to check it out. I think it's probably one of the coolest services out there that people are not familiar with yet. So for all of these transactions that you're doing anyways, let's say $3,000, $4,000 that you're sending, if there was no fee for it and there's a chance of getting it for free, then it's kind of a no-brainer. And if you look at all the people who are winning, a lot of it is $500 transactions or $1,000 ones, and it's people paying rent or people paying their friend back. If you're new to Yada, use code LUCKY to get extra shares, but I think this whole debit card thing is the interesting bit right now. Taking it a step back, do I think these companies will do this, add a surcharge in order to make credit cards pretty much obsolete? I think it's unlikely due to the competitive landscape of the US. You have the Amazons and the Walmarts of the world who would happily lose money on this in order to just get more customers. That's pretty much been their game plan and playbook for the longest time. They'll happily lose money on a few items to make money elsewhere. On the other hand, you have new entrants, and especially from people who are a bit more tech savvy, who might use that as leverage. So for example, if I were to open up a bubble tea store, and if all the other places charged extra for using a credit card, I would do the opposite. I would just charge more for my drink, but leverage that whole aspect. You have a Chase Sapphire Reserve, you get free tapioca, go for it. It doesn't cost me that much. It's 5 cents in order to get a sale that's $5. If this new world does end up happening, then feel free to come check out my boba store. But until then, if you are someone that wants to learn about cards, whether it's Chase, Citi, whoever else, and you want to support the channel, we do have links on our website, AskSebby.com, and also down below in the description box. My question for you guys is, what places would you consider institutions that even if they were to charge a fee for credit cards, you would happily still go? I'm trying to make a list of restaurants that I need to try in the US, so feel free to leave them down below, and it'd probably help other people too. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. If you know anyone else who might benefit, share this with them. Will probably help them out. But otherwise, hope you guys liked it. See you guys next time.